welcome back, everybody, to the Chisme and Shadows podcast with your host, the one and only Miguel. Thank you, and welcome to episode 8. I'm excited to have you guys here. I'm actually pretty excited to film this episode. It's gonna be a much more relaxed episode. I'm got myself extra comfortable, and plus, I got out of my rut. And now that I'm out of my rut, I feel so much better, and I feel like I have some unfinished business. So, with that being said, in this episode, we're definitely going to finish our conversation about confrontation from the last episode. We're going to get into some very juicy chisme, which is honestly a big, huge part of the podcast, was just to not take the world too serious, enjoy the world around us, and I think it's totally okay to, you know, talk a little bit about what's going on around your life, make it a little exciting. I like to feel like I'm in the middle of a CW show, not as the protagonist, but just as a side character, watching all that drama and stuff. It's very entertaining. It gets my life going pretty much. And then we'll end it off. And I have another it's a very entertaining tale. Somebody wants to know, are they the jerk? And guess what? We're going to answer that here on my podcast because that's what I like to do. I think my opinion is better than yours. Pause. But yeah, so I hope you guys enjoy this episode because I'm going to have a good time talking about everything. And we're going to take our time and we're going to enjoy ourselves. And that's what we're going to do in this podcast. Now, of course, if you're an avid listener, then I thank you and appreciate you. But if you are listening to this, you could share it to one or two people. It will definitely be very helpful towards the podcast. I'm gonna start trying to spread the word a lot more. Have a lot of ideas. I'm gonna make more short-term content to promote this podcast. And I'm actually really behind on Spotify, and I haven't even put this on Apple Podcasts because they actually require you to pay up front, which is a completely different story. But yeah, eventually it will be. So if you're listening on Spotify, thank you very much. If you're listening on Apple Podcast, then you're probably way behind. But still, thank you anyway. And yeah, let's just have some fun. Okay, so in the last podcast, we were talking a little bit about confrontation, but at the same time we were talking about that, I was very much distracted because I was really, really, really interested in getting into some further conversations, some further topics. But because of that, I feel like I didn't actually finish what I was trying to get across. I thought about it afterwards. After finishing the podcast, I was like, man, I just feel like I did all this, but I didn't really get to the core of things. So that's what I'm going to try to do. And to do that, I'm going to make sure I narrow in the problem and narrow in the topic and make sure I'm not getting distracted. On top of this, I had a fellow friend, um, listener to the podcast. You know who you are. Thank you, like always. Because at the very least, I always know there's at least one person listening, right? But nonetheless, she had pointed out that I wasn't really reaching the depth that I had to, right? And of course, sometimes, these ideas, these talking points are kind of just created. There's a very thin outline for my podcast, but sometimes it's so thin that it's literally just topic confrontation. And that's the only thing I have to use it off. Because for the most part, I've been pretty good at being able to come up with, creating the whole topic as I go. But sometimes it's not always going to work out. So because of that, I've decided to slow it down a little bit and make sure I get to the meat and potatoes of it. And since we did talk about it last time, I'm not going to really I'm not going to really repeat myself as much. So essentially, last podcast, I did explain why it's important to have the ability to confront someone or something, right? And as my friend pointed out, it really seemed like it had potential to to be very specific to certain people. But interestingly enough, when I chose that as a topic for the podcast, I had nobody in particular in mind. But as I was, as the workshop was going on and I was thinking and talking, some people did come to mind, but that was during the creation. And I honestly, without their permission, would not want to I would not want to tell their stories, which is why I didn't really specifically mention anybody, because to be honest, it just there's a couple of different people that probably have had situations in which they don't confront people. So it's not really something that only one person has ever done. And that's another good reason why I was like, didn't feel like getting very specific. Uh, Even though I thought of some specific things. And on top of that, I was trying to tell a story, but then I decided to back or to stop myself. And I really sold myself short because I didn't really get to the actual confrontation or really show why it's important. So, again, another reason why I had to run it back. I had to run this topic back. And for everybody listening, keep in mind, I usually have these things at the very start, mostly because it's when you're the most actively hearing me. But again, it could also be a bad thing because if the first thing you hear from the podcast is straight up, it's not really lecturing, but if you get the impression of lecturing, then it's going to be a problem because you might not want to listen through the whole thing. So because of that, in the future, there's a good chance I'm going to restructure the podcast because I don't want you to leave believing that the podcast is just going to be telling you how to live your life. That's not it at all. Or if you'd believe me or not, I actually would hope that you would listen to the podcast, and as you're listening and as the topic is introduced, you then have like a light bulb moment, and then you realize that it was something that had been bothering you or was potentially something that you needed help with, and then bam, my podcast, does you good. Or otherwise, maybe you could think of other people who could use the information, and then maybe you could introduce them to the podcast or just use my advice for them, right? So, okay, confrontation is obviously important. And we also talked about how it's not always going to be the number one thing to do depending on your situation. But what do we do? What do we do if we want to confront somebody or confront a problem? What are these steps to do this? Well, you have to really consider the situation you're in already. And I mean the feeling you have of either tension, awkwardness, whatever it may be, anger, I don't even know, even sadness, whatever it is, whatever the issue, whatever the person, whatever feeling they're getting you to feel, that is what you're feeling right now. That's your current status. And you know what this leads to. Okay, let's take this as an example. Let's just say you're at work, and let's just say you have somebody who is constantly, I don't know, talking about things you're uncomfortable with, right? Yeah, that's a good example because it's very similar along the lines to actually a couple of different situations that have kind of gone on, but let's just say that. So the feelings you would have is an uncomfortable feeling, and that's what you feel. That's what's going on, and that's what the feelings, and you really, really don't like it. You just do not like that. It is causing extreme uncomfortableness. Let's just say. Okay, well now that's the feeling you have. You know those are the feelings you have, and you know what's causing that. These are all things that you know. And this is important because what keeps people from being able to confront people and problems is actually the creation of things you don't know. and using those just the same as what you do know. And this is what I mean. You start to think, I don't like how this person is talking about these certain things. They're making me uncomfortable. I want to confront them. But if I confront them, they probably just gonna they're probably just gonna be mad at me. They're gonna get angry at me. The situation's not gonna be better. It's just gonna go nowhere, etc. You just created all these scenarios, all these things that are almost being treated just like they are a reality. Like that is what A plus B equals that. But these things haven't happened yet. And these are all assumptions. And yeah, you may have made these assumptions with the knowledge of whoever, knowing how the person is. It doesn't even matter. You may have made very great assumptions. It still doesn't matter. These are things you created. And I always feel like your body would naturally do these type of things in many different situations as a way of like some, you know, very ancestral survival instincts, right? It doesn't want you to do something that could potentially lead to your death. But of course, in modern times, most of these things don't not even get close to leading to your death. They just end up, having potential social, you know, ramifications, I guess, if that's what you even want to kind of say, right? I totally get it. It's the fear of an idea that could or may not happen. It's what has been said many times before. Humans fear what they don't know. And as broad and as widely known you may think that statement is, people don't apply it to everyday situations, even though they kind of recognize it's out there. You don't know what's going to happen, so you're afraid to confront it. It's totally understandable. Everybody has, like, to an extent, that same level of fear because it is kind of a fear. But, okay, those are the things you have created. Remember, we just talked about what you do know. So you do know the situation you're in now is bad. Bad or good. You create a new situation. You just have to. Because you know your situation's bad. So the new situation, whether it's bad or good, it only either remains or helps you. It doesn't become any worse in the sense of bad and good. Those are the two things. If we want to break it down to simplistic forms, right? Bad, good. Situation, bad. Situation, good. There's not a third. It's one of those two. And if you think about that, if you think about bad or good situation, then you understand that the situation will either remain bad or the situation will be good. And you don't know which one it's going to be. And you don't need to think about whether it's going to be bad or it's going to be good. But what you do have to think about is the fact that the situation you're in now is bad. And you can't stay in that. Thus, you take the step. Because if what you're in is bad, the only way to make it good is literally a step. In our situation, it's confrontation. And of course, confrontation doesn't have to be this whole big old thing, because many times confrontation is done in much smaller steps. What does this mean? Oh, it's pretty simple. It's honestly simple, but let me break it down just a little bit. The smaller steps is confrontation, and what really is just speaking out your feelings. That's really what confrontation is. Right? Your boss had just told you, you're going to be working this shift now. You did not want to work that shift, so you tell them, actually, I don't want to work that shift if possible. That's literally the the very much basic small version of that. You did it. Your coworker, you know, tells you, hey, go clean this or blah blah blah. Actually, I think you should do it. Or actually, I'm want to take a lunch, and and um, I don't want to do it. These are the small things that we often do. Not everybody does them though. And the thing is, you live so much of your life letting these things slide that it makes it extra hard when something really big happens, and you naturally find it very hard to resist and deal with the situation. Anywho, to my friend out there who's listening to this, I hope in a way at least I could somewhat round out the what I was, my whole point about confrontation. And now I do feel like I rambled on a lot, and sometimes that happens, and my memory isn't the best. So sometimes I forget. So there might have been multiple steps in confrontation, but I I gave the very much universal one. That's the universal step. Realizing your situation, realizing the actual facts, and making sure you move forward without creating potential scenarios. And again, to my friends listening, I I did, you know, I did in a way think a lot about uh, some things you have told me in the past. So for that, I hope it didn't overstep. And also, there's plenty of people who need this advice. Um, and just know this wasn't a topic chosen because me thinking about you and maybe how you were dealing with the situation. Not at all. I chose the topic, and as I'm creating ways to talk about it, I did remember you and situations. Just so you know, yeah, I think we can move on from that because honestly, I don't know if it's one of those things that should be talked about in as lengthy for just a segment. I feel like you could definitely talk about it for a podcast if I wanted to. But my podcast isn't never really just a one topic podcast. I don't know, maybe if there was a topic in the future I really wanted to talk about for a whole hour, then I would. But mm, not really right now. So, okay, this next one, oh my god. I really feel like I've let down the name of my podcast because there hasn't been as much chisme, and we need that. We need a little bit of drama. I don't really like calling it gossip because in Spanish it sounds a little more, I don't know, neutral in terms of anybody could talk about it. I feel like socially gossip is somewhat looked down upon, and I get it. I really do. But if people want to live boring lives, that's on them. I don't like to involve myself in drama, but I definitely do like when the world around me is filled with it. I'm very much an agent of chaos, but it's the way I feel like my life gets, entertainment in the real world. Obviously, I'm not going to start drama for that sake, not necessarily. I mean, I've been known to stir the pot every once in a while, but it's sometimes, I'll be honest, it's just sometimes not needed. There's already enough ridiculousness. Okay, so for those of you who who I know in the real world, which is only a few of you because this podcast has remained primarily a secret from a lot of my coworkers and a lot of my friends. Mostly actually because I wanted to somewhat grow it naturally and get it out there. But eventually, I know it's going to reach a lot more ears. And because of that, if this is the first podcast you're listening to, coworkers, then please understand that this is the name of the game. This is the podcast title. It's going to be a little bit about that. For the most part, for a lot of you, it's just a lot of love, but there's some coworkers that are going to be mentioned with other names because I will never call them out unless they give me permission to. And even when they give me permission, like Ricky gave me permission to give his name out, put his name out there. But I like the name Ricky, and I like coming up with nicknames for people. And I feel like I'm gonna be in the center of a lot of drama someday. It's bound to happen. So it is what it is. But again, for those of you who are fellow coworkers, fellow friends, watching, listening, just know what you're about to hear is very much stuff that you're gonna be looking at with a more, because I here's the thing, I am very analytical of the world, and I like to analyze body language. I really do, and it isn't always accurate. I'm by no means a pro at that, and I have no proper training, schooling, nothing like that. But I promise you, I'm very good at it. But I do jump to conclusions all the time, and most of the time they're very, very wild. Ricky, one day I'm gonna have him on the podcast, but Ricky would be able to. He'll be able to explain that I come up with some outlandish theories, and sometimes I actually want them to be true because that they would be movie level. Like CW has nothing on some of my theories. Okay, so I'm not gonna lie, the last couple of days have been very, very conflicting in my head because I don't know how to process this. I don't know how to process what I've been seeing around me. Uh, so I'm not gonna give out any names, and this shouldn't get me in trouble because by the time anybody involved sees this, this should be long gone out of my life, probably, maybe, I don't know. And I'm not gonna get too specific anyway because like I said, there's some coworkers that are listening to this, and I don't want you guys to overthink things either. But what I've been noticing lately, I've had some coworkers involved in these explicit adultish behaviors. I don't know, and it's made my mind go a little sideways because they involve people I didn't think would be involved in that way, and I don't know if there's anybody I could really tell. But for the viewers who aren't familiar with my world, let's just say the story is I got a coworker who is in a relationship, and I've noticed them, like I've noticed some some things that the only way to describe him is like flirting. And maybe because I've in the past have been a little bit like this, which is hard to believe. For some people it's hard to believe because I just feel like I'm not that type of person anymore, and I'm so far from that it's hard to believe at one point I even was. But I've noticed them flirting with another coworker, and like I said, they're in a relationship, and uh, and the thing is, this other coworker, right, the one that's involved at the very beginning, it was hard to believe. Maybe it was hard to believe because there's more to that person. There's somebody I just saw him a little differently. Well, I guess. I mean, it's true. I didn't really see him as the flirting type. But besides that, hey everybody, sorry to interrupt the amazing podcast you are currently listening to, but I had to hop on here because I feel like I need to clear up a little bit of the air. I know the story hasn't really been told fully yet, and before we do that, I want to make sure people understand that after just a little bit of more time, I've learned of a couple of more things that might be crucial in knowing before I even say anything, really. So to begin with, I did end up finding out from another coworker that potentially this type of behavior that I'm about to kind of tell a little bit is might be a little bit more normal on the shift that they normally work on, which again, I only work with them for about an hour every day. So that isn't enough time to really get to know them as in terms of their relationship and how they work. So that is one thing to keep in mind. Is it's possible that what I'm about to say is can be simply said to be playfulness amongst a group of people. That's what I'll say because you guys don't know what I'm talking about yet. And on top of that, the individual in this story, because this story will involve a boy and a girl. Well, the girl, she also her personality type could also indicate that there's social cues that people give that might go over her head. Not to say she's socially awkward. That's not it exactly. But you know what's a lot more normal for people in terms of like understanding what people are doing in certain instances. For example, if somebody were to flirt with this person and there's a good chance they just simply would not understand that there was flirting being done in general. And with that in mind, that is also the potential to be some confusion there. And it might not be a scenario where both individuals are coming across to each other correctly. So that could also be a thing. But again, so I want you guys to come into this and listen to this story that I'm about to say and simply take it as an interesting, enjoyable story. And I wouldn't dig too much into it. And if in the future, if any of the people involved in this story are listening to this, please understand that this is at the most part for entertainment purposes, and I'm not trying to make your life public, which is why I honestly don't think you have anything to worry about here. I've kept it pretty anonymous on purpose. So yes, I had to stop by and make sure I said these things because the podcast portion you're about to listen to is pretty raw, and I didn't have enough time to properly probably process everything, which is kind of what I used the podcast for. So with that in mind, let's get back into what you guys were listening to. At the very beginning, I was getting some impressions that coworker was very much not into it. Like it was a one-way harassment essentially. Like the coworker who's in a relationship was doing some very, I don't know, some like very pushy things. Some things, like little okay, this is going to sound like I'm describing some like sexual harassment type of BS or type of serious shit, right? No. It's not it wasn't to that extent, but just imagine like I don't know, like for example, if I had a female coworker and constantly go and like, poke her in the back or, maybe give her a little like friendly shoulder bump or, those type of things that very much are just like flirty physical interactions, right? Or at least they would be flirty physical interactions if the other person reciprocated those type of interactions, like if they were okay with those type of things, then it's whatever. But at first, I was the vibes I was getting from the coworker, and I normally I would use nicknames, but I'm telling you now, it people would catch on so quick. It's crazy. And for coworkers who are listening to this, if you want to know, I will let you know in person. But otherwise, the coworker just yeah, she seemed to very much not be into it. Uh, sh the only way to explain it is like she seemed like she had the personality, like she has the personality of somebody who doesn't like to um who doesn't like to I don't know if this is even a good way to explain it, but somebody who doesn't like to say no, or somebody who's afraid of like that of saying of like socially saying no. I'm sorry if that doesn't make any sense, but like somebody who is kind of always been very um timid is a word that could be used. Somebody who's always getting teased, or like people will kind of tease her and she's always, or like decides to accept being the butt of the joke. And I always find it a little strange, and my buddy Ricky will definitely agree with me here, that in general, why does it seem like a lot of the guys with with the girls, and I mean girls that are usually a little closer in age, right? But the only way they understand how to interact with them is by teasing. I always found it strange in my job how a lot of my guy coworker friends, right, or a lot of my guy friends from work, the only thing they seem to know how to do with some of these, some of the girls at my job is tease them. Like there's no normal interaction. The interactions are always calling them names, and of course I don't mean like it very much comes off as like brotherly play, but I feel like there's a limit, or it can't be at all times. It's just, to me, it's so strange. And again, I don't. This is gonna come off as more of a therapy session for me, and I will try my best to edit out any extreme runoffs, which I am notoriously famous for. But I can't just get rid of all of them. So again, if you're listening to this, I appreciate you because you are getting some very much ranting. It's not even ranting, it's just storytelling. Storytelling in a very natural way. I think of you as somebody who's right next to me and I'm trying to explain to you, but I am doing like somewhat of a presenter voice. The presenter voice is just naturally there because my mind is trying to slow down my cadence so I have time to think about what I'm going to say next. It's really odd and I hate it, but it's what my mind does. Anywho, back to the story. And I was talking about how guys seem only to do that. And again, she seems to me like one of those people that have just accepted that a lot of the guys do that to her. I'm promise I'm not one of those guys. I I definitely know when you could do a little bit of teasing because I think it's a very natural thing to do, especially in a more of a friendly, you know, male female relationship at work, right? When you're just friends, I think it's a lot of like instinctually like brother sister type of playing around. Totally get that, I really do, and you know, I have a little bit of that, but I'm just don't. I I just don't really. For me, most of the time it's like casual, friendly conversation to these humans, and I'll treat them, you know, like that level of friendship I would treat the same as my friendship with my guy friends. And I'm not at all times teasing my guy friends, or like, of course, it's a little bit of a difference, but not really. If you think about it, if they're meant to just be your friends, then you would treat them as friends. But it almost comes across as really, I don't know, it's in my head it's a little strange. Again, but I'm also not the right person to be commenting as much on social interactions, since I'm not. I don't know. I'm not. I can't say I am or I'm not. But yeah, I don't feel like I'm like socially. I've always acted just a little different, just a little. Oddly enough, I still wouldn't call myself socially awkward, but I'm definitely on the spectrum of that. I'm the latter. I'm not necessarily great at socializing, but I'm not like socially awkward. Again, let's just go back to the very beginning. Again with this this coworker of mine who I'd say in a way, I've lost quite a bit of respect for. And I'm of two minds because I understand people's personalities, I understand their situations, and their life experiences all leads to them being a certain way. 100% understand, but you got to keep in mind that I am me and I'm from an outside perspective looking at this situation. And I'm not a huge fan of seeing these type of things being allowed. I really, really like people to stand up for themselves or to ask somebody to stand up for them, one or the other. I don't like people who get, you know, who get talked down on, who get bullied, teased, taken advantage of, and they're okay with it, or they don't have the willpower to do anything about it. Um, I don't really like to see that. And this person isn't necessarily that close either to where I'm not going to stand up for them as much as in my mind I am that type of person who really really wants to. But it's really hard to do that and not because it's again, it's not something I don't want to do. I really do. But I can't be doing that. At some level, you have to reach out in one way or the other. And if you don't have that strength, unfortunately, I don't know what to do. And again, if I was closer to this person, because I've a lot of friends who I would do this, no questions asked. They don't even need to ask. But I'm not close enough to this person. I could only watch. Obviously, if there is a boundary crossed, like if I see that guy do something to like a certain point, I would. And before this, and again, I have to interject my own story. Again, uh, these are based off these are based off body language and just like social interactions I watch, right? Okay? No confirmation on these things because it's happened before, but sometimes there are people that subconsciously do these things and they might not mean to do it. So again, because of that, I can't just outright say that is for sure what's happening. And again, this is and remember this is what I initially thought. At the very very start, I thought it was unwarranted. And because of that, I was feeling very very conflicted. I'm still feeling conflicted, but now it's for a different reason. Because now I might have seen indications that it's double sided. Like it's this, that coworker might actually enjoy the flirtatious interactions. I sound like sometimes I hear myself and I think I'm not speaking as naturally as I would, but I'm you can take my word that I at least speak about 80% like this even outside of the podcasts. I really do. That's just who I am. That's just my natural way of speaking nowadays. I do have a bit more of a like a faster cadence outside because I'm just blah 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 blah. I'm a yapper. It's just what I do. Okay, and again, the reason this is caused internal conflict is because, for one, this other person is in a supposed relationship. Of course, the last time I confirmed that was months ago, so it might not even be true anymore. So that could definitely change things. It's one of those things where once you see it, you can't unsee it. So again, if you're listening to this as a coworker and you want to know the real thing, you're not going to be able to unsee it once you do. But if you don't, it's fine. It's in fact maybe for the best because it is speculative in a way. I hardly miss though. I just hardly miss. I know these things. I get the vibes. I pay attention to the clues, but I'm keeping it low key cool for now, and I'll let the situation go on. It's just one of those things that you just what can you do? I'm not close to either of them. I'll be honest. I'm just not. So what's it to me? I'm just gonna chill, and I'm just gonna do my thing. Work drama is one of those things that just it's all fun and games until it's not. As somebody who has a couple of times been involved in it, it's never fun when you're in it. So, I've had my fair share of eggs being thrown in my face. And it's not great, but it's gonna happen. I've seen it. I've seen it time after time. It's always gonna happen. It's always gonna happen. The only thing you could really do is kind of roll with it. You didn't create it, hopefully, and you're not planning on being involved in it, hopefully. So you don't need to feel bad about just watching it and actually being entertained by it. You could be entertained by it. It's fine. I think it's totally fine. Um, I personally think it's totally fine. So I'm excited for people who are listening to this, who work with me. I'm excited for you guys to hear this. Uh, Not because of what happened and what could it possibly mean. And again, I've been keeping things extremely private for the sake of them, and for the sake of in case this podcast ends up being seen a lot more. Because in the previous podcast, I've released some things that even with nicknames being used, I think what the point of that is going to be, because there's a feeling that needs to come out of that, or and the feeling I want from people is just like a very much like, oh my god, I wonder what's going on there, or man, I really would want to know more. That's what I want. And then I'm gonna have to really think about things, because I feel like this story was there's so many details covered. Like there's so many, like, and I mean covered like as in like literally not seen, like covered with a blanket, purposefully, because I was trying to really tiptoe around very specific things. So again, I'm gonna have to apologize for that, but you have to understand these are real life people that I might have to see in the morning. And oddly enough, this, you know, does have the potential to put me as the protagonist of a CW story, essentially. And that's not the point at all. It was very much a mix of like a therapy session as well as like me trying. No, it is literally essentially a therapy session. I was I was figuring things out as I'm speaking and trying to make sense of what I've been a part of, or no, not even being a part of, but what I've witnessed. So, essentially, because this is a very chill podcast, and I'm absolutely chilling here, I've somewhat decided to avoid getting into any crime or horror story related things. They don't always have to happen, especially because we delved so much into Chisme section. That there was another very much serious topic. Not even, I wouldn't say serious, but it's a topic I've decided to talk about. It was going to be overall my main topic, um, because the first section when we talked about confrontation, I was really just trying to create like a. I was really trying to make peace with that, really give it a proper part two. And I don't even think I did full justice, but I hope I got something across this time around. But the actual main advice I wanted to give everybody today had to do a lot with family and when it's okay to cut off family. I want to talk about if it's ever okay to cut off family. The short answer is yes, there is times when it's okay to cut off family, but when is that line drawn? And what is the saying about thicker what's the saying thicker is blood? And is that always take priority? It's it's interesting because this is there is slight differences based on culture as well. Obviously, I'm Latino, and in the Latino household, family plays such a huge importance. We tend to stay with family for a lot longer than other cultures might. And the yearning for independence isn't always there for most traditional Latino families. There's the exceptions, which I've seen a couple of, you know, people get, if their families might try different things and, you know, they may give the princess of the family the ability to, you know, live her life to the fullest. And that's, can't say I'm not jealous. But a lot of the times, Latinos don't get to think about independence. We don't really get to have this, man, once I turn 18, I get to move out. That isn't really common. At least I haven't seen it to be a very common thing. It tends to be where, like, oftentimes you end up staying with your family for a long time um, because you're trying to help each other, you're trying to work together, but it isn't always a good thing. Sometimes that lack of independence is actually harmful and it really limits your potential for growth and potential to do things because I mean, if you only have to pay this amount of bills, the need and desire, so in a way it actually puts a limit on you. But our main focus isn't going to be that. uh we're not going to be talking about the downfalls of being in a Latino family. You know, that's not the topic. The topic is, what if you have family members that you would consider to be toxic, meaning they're people that actually bring you down negatively. And you could think about that in terms of internal or external, you know, literally take away from you physically or, you know, get you into a position or mentally that is downright negative. But they're your family, right? And what can you, because, you always prioritize family. Well, I gotta say, it's not something that you need to settle for. You don't need to accept that that's just the way things. And I'm gonna go ahead and bring up a great example. I have a friend who I will call Devin. Yeah, Devin. Devin has been a close friend of mine for years and years and years. We're actually childhood friends. And as we grew up, he has always had a very strict household. Lots of rules, and of course, if you're a child under your parents' household, I I totally think it's fair to have rules you have to obey by. They're paying for you to live there, and of course, that gets into some moral dilemmas in terms of whether you know you owe your parents anything. But at the very least, I could agree with the fact that there's some sense of limitations that are allowed to be given by your parents. But as Devin grew older, the rules didn't seem to change. And as he approached the ages where most children are no longer children, where kids mature into adults and get independence. Well, Devin just didn't. And even though his situation didn't really change much, his mindset or his perspective only seemed to get worse. He started to develop feelings of resentment towards his parents because at this point he understands that people around him, including myself, were the same age, but life has life had changed for a lot of us. As I got into my 20s, you started to see the separation of parents and their child. I started to gain a lot more independence. I, of course, am in a Latino household, so I was staying with my family. But the thing about it, what tends to happen is, in a very, in my opinion, again, my opinion, in a very healthy adult household, you may be living together. One may be the parent, but you have almost sort of gained like a co-dependence rather than a dependent, independent. As the child, you no longer depend on your parent. You are living with them, but you are as much part of the household and, providing as they are, and thus they should be treating you essentially as equals. It's not exactly, but they treat you as adults. And as that was happening to me, all of a sudden he was able to tell exactly how different his life was in comparison. He was able to realize that he was in a very different position than a lot of the people around him, and he just didn't understand. He didn't get why. Why was he in his 20s? Why was he still being treated as a child? Why were his parents imposing so many rules when he was an adult? Um, why were these things happening? And then with that, and not having the ability, again, I could always include a little bit of everything of what we've learned, but he accepted that that's just the way it had to be. He didn't want to confront his parents because of this fear that his parents would kick him out. And this is because his parents had always threatened him with being kicked out if he didn't. And you know, as we had talked about confrontation at the very beginning, we'll go back to this idea of very toxic family members because the parents at one point decided they weren't going to try to get their child to start to fly. I can't really speak as to why they did it, but what they did do is continued to keep him dependent on them, thus making it socially, I think socially acceptable to have all these sort of rules on somebody who is in their mid 20s. And it's very much an unfortunate situation. In this type of situation, we're not going to analyze whether or not the parents are in the wrong, or whether or not my friend should have, you know, tried harder to go and be independent. That's not at all it. But you could say his parents were negatively affecting him at that point. Whether my friend Devin likes to admit it or not, there's a family connection there that just cannot be let go of. And so I will say, for family members that have reached the level of toxicity, not necessarily that my buddy Devin's parents did, but that reaches a level where it's negatively affecting you, I think it is okay to consider the option of cutting them off. as hard as it can be, because I think cutting off, to get a little personal here, I lost my dad at a very early age. Well, okay. I lost my dad when I was still in high school. He didn't die, he went to jail. And at that moment, things things changed really quickly. And there was so many internal conflicts there because I'll be honest, I had to start to realize that I had lived a very toxic relationship with him. He was somebody who had a lot of issues, and for most of my life he would be what you would call toxic. Oddly enough, the last like couple of months before he went to jail, he was actually very much like a little different, but unfortunately it was a little too late. And he went to jail, and then I had to confront the idea of this person who I considered to be my father, but to also see him as more than that. And it's like staring at your father, but realizing that he's essentially a monster. One of the hardest things I've ever had to do. And I don't know if I ever fully was able to. A couple years later, after that, he would end up being released and he would end up dying. And I would never see him. Like, after he went to jail, I never saw him in person again. He died, unfortunately, with none of his, you know, family members there. And it's actually rather sad. But you have to remember, this is somebody who, uh, he wasn't an evil man, but he was a monster in a sense. Um, and even though it wasn't my choice to cut him off, he was forced to be cut off. It was only then I realized that he was somebody who should have been cut off probably a long time ago. But it goes, it I think it surpasses you know, cultural boundaries. It's universal. Your family, it will be the hardest thing to cut out of your life. It just is. And I don't know if it's a social thing or if instinctually it's hard to let go, but it will be one of the hardest things anybody has to do. My advice isn't this is how you do it or this is why you should do it. My advice is it is okay to do it, but this is just going to be the only thing you could do. And my only advice is reflect. Reflect on the people around you. And if you're lucky, the reflection is going to be simple and easy, and you're going to be like, yeah, my mom and dad, cool. Brothers, sisters, cool. Yeah, cool. But for some of you, the reflection might be a little tougher. Might start to realize things, and it's okay. I think you should take your time with it because it's not an easy concept. I feel like the title for this episode could easily be therapy session or something because I honestly do feel like I was asked questions that I've never been asked before, and I've told stories that I really hope end up making sense, and I didn't just you know do this where like I'm like, oh yeah, he's doing it. Oh yeah, I could see him. I know where he's going, and then never reach the top. Just like, in which case I'm sorry. I I'll do my best for next time if that's it. If that's the case. Hopefully it has been the case, and hopefully you guys have enjoyed so far because we're getting real close to that ending time. But we're gonna get into the Am I the Asshole segment where we're gonna talk about a juicy story because that's what we do here on my podcast. Are you guys ready? Because I'm ready. I mean, honestly, I could probably do this every single day if I could to just yap about different things. I will gladly do it. But unfortunately, editing these podcasts are not very easy because, believe it or not, my recording always ends up being almost 2 hours long. I don't release the podcast at 2 hours long. And in order to really find out which parts I want to keep and not keep, I have to watch the full podcast through. So it's at least 2 hours from just watching the podcast back. Not to mention doing a couple of editing things that, you know, will take up its own time and then everything else. So again, I wish I could do it more. I think I would personally enjoy either making the podcast longer or releasing 2 podcasts a week. That's what I would enjoy. But it would not be easy to do that. And would people want to tune in 2 times a week for an hour and a half? It's hard to tell. This one's pretty short, so I'm actually very curious whether it's gonna have the substance to let us talk about it. Okay, let's just dive into it. Am I the asshole for telling my friend's boyfriend about her infidelity? Interesting. I thought infidelity was a concept or a thing you could only do if you were married. But I probably am wrong. My friend has been secretly hooking up with a guy since a month, while her boyfriend was pretty serious about her. I explicitly told her that I not condone this behavior. The grammar is purely from the story. To avoid divulging in the details with me, and the right thing to do would be to come clean break up or break up with her boyfriend. She went away on a trek, I'm assuming she meant trip, with her hookup, and I lied to her boyfriend that it was me who had gone with her. I knew nothing of it. When he called me to check if I could get a hold of her, I obviously told him I don't know. He called me back a couple of minutes later after having called other people to know what's really going on, and he kept pushing it. I told him that he should probably ask her or check her texts. He did check them, learned the truth, and broke up. Now she and a few other friends think I'm the asshole. Everything has been thrown around from how I was a bad friend for not covering for her, and it wasn't my place to say anything. I wanted her boyfriend to myself, etc. Am I the asshole? Okay. The first thing I want to say, and I'm sorry because I don't know for a fact. If you are not originally an English speaker, then again, I'm sorry. But otherwise, that was atrocious. That was just atrocious. Do better. We literally have the ability to auto fix your mistakes and like Google correct and all sorts of bullshit, you know? They could do all sorts of things. There's no reason to have such terrible writing. Um okay, being said, with that being said, here's the thing. If, if this would have been pretty easy, had she been the one that was cheating, or had this story had been written from the perspective of the girl who's cheating, because it's just wrong. But you're just a friend who was covering up and essentially stopped covering up and got the idea and the boyfriend to check messages. So it's not that simple. But but you are the asshole. And it's funny because I saw at least one comment, and I think I'm gonna be on the minority side, right? But she is the asshole. She, in fact, in what she had said, she did not cover up for her friend, and she did not just let it slide And I know what you're thinking. I'm like, well, she said she's not comfortable doing that, blah, blah, blah. But that's the thing. She wasn't put in the position where she either had to cover up or she had to tell the truth. There was one option that she could have taken where she would have not been the asshole. She would have not had to do any of this covering up. She would have had to do none of that. She should have just ignored ignored the boyfriend, not get involved. Not getting involved was the best option for her. Unfortunately, she chose the route that led to her friend getting broken up. Yeah, I mean, look. I get it. Her friend was doing something morally wrong. And I agree with that. It was morally wrong. And her being uncomfortable, being put in that position, I totally understand it. I get it. I really do. I really do. I really get it. That doesn't it doesn't take away from the fact that she is your friend and you just caused her to be in this situation. Well, you caused her to break up with her boyfriend. And you did that. So rather than you know not being her friend anymore, which is a possibility because it was pretty obvious you kept thinking this that your friend was morally wrong and you didn't like it and stuff like that. Okay, she doesn't have to do anything based on your own personal values. She doesn't. So, what you could do at that point is stop being a friend. Yeah, you had that personal choice, but you didn't do that. You didn't decide to, stop being friends with this person you obviously clearly didn't align with in terms of values, and you let yourself continue to be in this position that you said you didn't want to be part of. You were not willing to confront the situation you were in. You were not confronting the problem, which is a misalignment in values. And clearly, this person probably shouldn't be your friend. I'm sorry, but it's just, I mean, that's the impression I'm getting. So I know in a way you were trying to be a good friend, trying to keep up the facade, and you still were trying to cover up for a little bit. But at the end of the day, after you eventually, you know, couldn't stand going against your moral values, which, I'm like, yeah, go do what you believe in. But in doing so, you screwed over your friend. Yeah, you screwed over your friend. You did. So, yeah, you're an asshole. You're an asshole. Rather than just letting a relationship, a friendship end for a very valid, good reason, rather than that, you chose to continue it based on selfishness. It's clearly selfishness, that or cowardice, one or the other. And yeah, and that led to you doing that, and you're an asshole. You're an asshole. But let's read a little bit of the comments because I just saw somebody saying she wasn't, which is crazy. Not the asshole is what this person says. Once she used you as her alibi, she crossed the line. Listen, we're not trying to argue whether her friend is a bad friend, whether or not she crossed the line. An eye for an eye makes the whole world blind. Just because she crossed the line doesn't mean all of a sudden her that doing this bad thing to her friend back isn't all of a sudden a good thing or isn't all of a sudden not an asshole thing. No. Like I said, that doesn't give her the right to do something back. It doesn't. Again, that's the thing though. I'm like, personally, I'm okay with what she did. I'm okay with what she did, but I also don't have any moral. I don't have any chickens in the fight. I don't even know if that's an existent phrase used, but I'm not friends with either of them. It wasn't me in that situation. So I see that being as like oh, okay, this person, got screwed by her friend. So I guess it was fine if she screwed over her friend back. So, but, that's just me being like, yeah, let them fight each other. To answer a question like, is she the asshole? That's completely different. Let's continue though. You simply told him the truth. She expected you to lie for her, and it backfired on her cheating ass. So here's the thing. I'm noticing something here from this one individual. They're they have judged the morality of the victim and used that as a basis to conclude that it was okay for her to have been essentially victimized. It was okay for somebody to treat this person this way because they did something that you find morally wrong. Do you understand how crazy that concept is? It basically means that if you think a person did something that doesn't quite match with your morals, you would be okay bad things happening to them. This human being, just because of a difference in morals. This one's funny. This person saying that she is the asshole, but for the reason being that she didn't tell the boyfriend quick enough. Okay, that is funny. That's funny because that's a crazy take. But then again, that's a crazy take from somebody who often makes crazy takes. Um, it's because they're saying that you're an. It's like, it's funny because in this case, you're an asshole for simply seeing something bad happen and not doing something about it. Think about this. Walking down the street and somebody, you see somebody, you know, uh, somebody in the distance getting robbed, you're under no obligation to go and stop that robbery. And you're not an asshole for not trying to stop that robbery. It's not, you're under no obligation to do so. And even though it would be like one of those things where, uh, it's like you're morally you want to do something because you think it's wrong, of course, but you're under no obligation to fix a situation that you're not really involved in. Just because she knew that her friend was cheating did not mean that now there's a sense of obligation to let the truth come out. It isn't. It really does put you in a very, very awkward situation. So, again, I question why she didn't drop that friend. Is what I'm questioning, which is why I'm calling her the asshole because she let it get to this point. She should have dropped the friend. It's just what should have happened. But, okay. All right, guys. Thank you for joining me for episode 8. This one was wild. This one was really wild because we end up conversating a lot more and talking about things. There wasn't a scary story, there wasn't a crime story. It was just, you know, it was just a conversation about some topics that we're all trying to understand, as we get older, and then some chisme. Yeah, I like the chisme. It's fun. But yeah, and I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I hope you stay tuned in because uh, with everything, if everything goes okay, these are gonna be released consistently every single week. So yeah, I'll see you guys next one.